Thank you for joining us today. Right now we have Francesca Piumetti from Judicial Affairs at LMU, and so we're going to talk a little bit today. I referenced earlier in a previous video that there are some components of the student code that we need to talk about and highlight with respect to international education. Today we're going to talk about that and some of the ramifications that might happen if you were to break some of the rules and regulations that are on campus. So let's just start very quickly with the student code. What are some of the things that students need to know about the student code and judicial affairs with respect to an international experience?
What's really important for students to know is that the student conduct code applies to them abroad. So all of the policies and procedures and protocols of the student conduct code apply to them abroad, regardless of the laws of the country.
So they are 100% an LMU student, whether they are geographically in LA or in France or Japan.
Right.
Does that count for the alcohol policy, which, you know, the drinking age in the United States is 21, but France's drinking age may be 17?
Yes. So the student conduct code applies abroad. Our student conduct code says that students have to be 21 years old in order to drink alcohol, therefore it applies.
That's good to know. That's really important to know. What would happen, so walk us through a situation where if a student had charges filed against them that would result in judicial affairs attention, or even the allegation of an incident that could be brought to judicial affairs attention. How is that handled while they're abroad?
Typically students would be asked to, same process, so students would be asked to come forward for a hearing. Because they're abroad, we would ask them to contact us either via telephone or by Skype. We would have a judicial hearing, we would make a decision, we would inform them of the decision, and they would be afforded due process according to the student conduct code, just like they would if they were here.
Right, that makes sense. And so if they are found to be guilty of the charges that were brought against them, what would be some examples of ramifications? What could happen to a student?
Typically students that are abroad understand that they are representing the university in their programs, and so there's not a lot of, we don't see a lot of students getting involved in incidents abroad. However, if there is a situation and they are found responsible, students have been asked to engage in alcohol education programs abroad. If the situation is so egregious that the student can no longer remain in the program, then they may be asked to leave the program, leave the country, return home. But typically students that study abroad understand that they're representing LMU, they're representing the individual programs, they're representing their country, and
right.
So we really don't have a lot of situations when students study abroad. But if we do, it would be the sanctions would be appropriate.
Right. If a student is applying to go abroad and they might have some pending issue with judicial affairs, can they study abroad?
If a student is currently on probation, they are not allowed to study abroad.
That's right. So they have to receive a clearance from judicial affairs in order to have their application approved and to move forward.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense. Can we highlight a little bit some of the differences between what, like, for example, if there's an alcohol charge versus maybe creating a threatening environment charge? Are those, if there are allegations that are brought, I know that some students, there are some incidents where we have evidence that this absolutely happened and it's information that's brought to us by a faculty member. If a student raises a concern about another student on a program, we typically immediately connect with judicial affairs and begin to talk about that. Is that weighed as heavily as if a faculty raises a concern?
Sure. If students, we take every complaint seriously, and we will process any complaint of a violation of the student conduct code according to the processes, policies, and procedures of the student conduct code. So it's important for students, if in fact they feel as though they've been threatened or something has happened abroad that is a violation of the student conduct code, that they bring it forward.
Right.
Because we absolutely will take any complaint seriously, and we will you know, follow up in terms of an investigation. If that needs to be, if we need to involve public safety, we will do that. If we, it depends what comes up,
right.
But whatever comes up, we will handle it and we will process it accordingly.
And do we have a Good Samaritan policy on campus?
We do have a Good Samaritan policy on
Tell
campus.
us about that.
The Good Samaritan policy basically is asking students to make sure that they help each other, and so that if they are in a situation where another student needs help, that they will get that student help, and if in fact they've been drinking or they have or are under the influence of alcohol or maybe other drugs, that the Good Samaritan will apply, because really at the end of the day what we're really interested in is the students are safe.
Correct.
And that they really help each other.
Right.
And so if they have this fear of being in trouble, we have removed that so that they can make responsible choices in and around helping their fellow students,
right.
their fellow colleagues.
And that applies just the same as overseas as well.
Right.
That makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
Is there a difference between charges that would be filed for perhaps alcohol misconduct or creating a threatening environment within student code as academic misconduct?
Academic misconduct is really handled through academics and through all of these separate deans' offices. So if there is academic integrity issues or academic dishonesty issues, those all get handled through the dean's office.
Right. And however, our academic code of conduct does apply 100% to students while abroad as well.
Absolutely.
So while it wouldn't be routed through Judicial Affairs, that piece of who we are as an institution applies 100% overseas.
Right.
That makes perfect sense.
Right.
Is there anything that you would like students to take away from this conversation today about their international experiences and being safe and judicial affairs and student affairs?
I think it's really important when you're abroad to understand that you're in a different place, you're in a different country, you're in a different environment, to really think about safety when you do go out, when you do branch out, to make sure that you remember you are a representative of LMU and of the United States and of your programs, and that people have worked really hard to establish strong relationships with these programs. And so to just really remember that, and that you're there to learn, and that you're there to explore, and you're there to grow. And if in fact you move into situations where you're concerned for someone else's safety, get involved and get help. Always get involved and get help for your fellow LMU students. You need to be able to trust each other. You need to be able to, sort of make a plan before you go out. Stick to each other, understand that you're in a different place, that your support systems are going to be different.
Right.
So try to establish all of that before you go abroad, and then once you're abroad, try to establish that with your peers that you're sharing that experience with. And in terms of judicial affairs, we are interested in accountability.
Right.
It's an educational process, and typically we can get to some resolutions that will be helpful to students. Accountability is important.
Right.
We're here to uphold the standard, community standard, and the community is abroad. And so it just extends abroad. And so we just expect our students, the students that are studying abroad, we expect them to just be responsible and to represent as well. And most of the time, our students do.
I agree.
It's rare when we have an incident where Judicial Affairs needs to get involved.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Sure.
And thank you for watching the video. And you can move on to the next chapter now. Thank you and be safe.